I've been working on the new version of the wooden car pretty much all the time lately. The first prototype took 5 months to make. This latest one has taken maybe another month. It's been slow because I've been making proper drawings of all the parts and cutting out templates and testing and refining the fit and then cutting a finished part from marine ply. The new version looks similar to the first one, but there are lots of small improvements. The point is to make the car body as strong as it can be given the design that I've come up with, and see if that finished car is actually strong enough to go onto the road. To do that, I'm using better materials and better joints and lots of epoxy glue. I'm very lucky to have a full-size router table to cut out the long side pieces in one go. Now I know lots of you are thinking I should have designed all this on the computer in the first place, and you might be right, but I'm only slowly learning 3D drawing and I have no idea how to do stress design and things like that. This way I get to look at it all the time and figure out whether something might work or not. For instance, the original version had a 9x2 beam of wood down the centre, and that has been reduced to 2 square poles, each 44mm square, with some plywood boxing between them. That was to reduce weight, and many people told me it would increase rigidity. I'm sure that would look good too in a 3D model, but in fact it turned out that it didn't increase rigidity at all. In fact, it made it more twisty than ever. So I dispensed with most of the boxing for now at least. Could I have predicted that from a 3D model? Well, I'm sure some people could, but not me. I'm also allowing fairer curves in the plywood. That is, smoother, rounder curves, allowing the curvature of the actual sheets to dictate the shapes. That should mean that it looks better, no bumps or flats, but also the stresses should be spread out evenly throughout the body. Now, one of the big challenges all along was how to install the bottom bracket, where the pedal cranks go. We had hacked off one from a bicycle and made a crude bracket and bolted it onto the wooden spine, but that was hardly satisfactory, was it? Instead, Will and I came up with a neater solution. This one is made from trailer ply, but in future they could be made from aluminium plate. Basically, we stripped the crank down to its bare minimum parts and machined recesses for the crank bearings to sit in, and the 2 plates just sit on either side of the wooden spine. It could be neater than this, but I need to test it before I invest in aluminium plate. Another change is the new design for the steering column front bearing. Before, it was a bolt-on pillow block housing under the bonnet. Now the bearing sits at the correct angle in a hole in the front bulkhead frame. Neater and lighter, of course. And here's a whole new back wheel frame. Now, this was just an experiment. As you know, I wasn't happy with the wooden one I had made before. It wasn't quite rigid enough. So I started drawing shapes and cutting them out of steel so I could make a metal frame first and see how that was. I used pipe, and all my connectors have appropriate slots in them to take the pipe at more or less the correct angle. Then it just needed welding up. The whole thing hinges over another pipe to accommodate the suspension movement. Now, as I say, this was an experiment, and in fact it seemed very good so far, but that's not the point. The thing is, I'm really hoping to be able to offer plans for this car. Plans that can be used to make a car from wood by woodworkers using woodworking tools. So a metal back wheel frame that needs welding together was never a permanent solution. Instead, I was going to use what I learned and make up only the minimum parts I needed in steel, parts that could be bolted onto a wooden frame. Because you do need some steel to support the back axle and the derailleur assembly and the disc brake calipers. These all need to be accurately cut out, and wooden pieces just wouldn't stand up to the work that they need to do. So I'm hoping that I could supply the drawings for those parts, or possibly cut those parts out and sell them as part of a kit of tricky parts that you'll need. So anyone who wanted to build this car but who only has a jigsaw and a drill and a sander could buy the steel parts and just bolt those onto the wood. No need for a welder or a grinder or any of that stuff. That was the plan, and it's still the plan, but in the meantime I met a big problem. My wonderful plasma cutting machine has broken down, so I'm stuck with the parts I've already cut, and I can't cut out any more for now. The people who made the machine, Artec, live in England, and since Brexit that's become a real problem, but we're working on it. Fingers crossed we can get it sorted out without it costing thousands, which it might do. Anyway, after all that, I'm using the whole metal frame I made for now and hope to replace it with a wooden one sometime soon. Now back to the rest of the car. See now, epoxy resin is sticky and messy, but it does stick things together very well and it makes them waterproof. We made a couple of boats using this method and they go into the sea, so I'm not worried about a bit of mud on the car. People say, a wooden car? Won't it rot away? Well, eventually it would, of course, because nothing lasts forever, but I'm sure it will last many years first. Not that I'd recommend leaving it outside all the time. I think it should be stored in a shed, but riding around in the rain for a while or splashing through puddles isn't going to do it any harm at all. This boot top has to go over an arch shape, but this plywood is too stiff to bend over that curve, so I made a series of cuts that go halfway through to help it. You can do this easily on the CNC router, but perhaps the plywood is thicker than it needs to be anyway. By this stage of the build I could see that the body shell is extraordinarily rigid and strong, but not exactly lightweight. I need to get it onto the road for proper testing, but I'm thinking it could be made with thinner plywood and still be strong enough. The problem with that is the nearest I can find 4mm plywood in full-size sheets is in Dublin, and that's a long way from here. Unless anyone knows of somewhere nearer that stocks good quality plywood that's thinner than 6mm, please let me know. Apart from the weight, which isn't terrible but might put more load on the motor and on the brakes, I'm very happy with the body shell so far. Feels very robust. So I'm going to carry on and fit the rest of it. A new steering wheel, seat, pedals, chain, gears, wheels, obviously, battery lights, a horn, reflectors, and eventually a roof. But maybe I should finish this first somehow to make it a bit more presentable, make it pretty even. Paint is a problem at this time of year because of our wet, cold climate, so I've ordered some car wrap. What could go wrong?